A desperate search for answers has become a terrifying performance for survival. After discovering that a cursed notebook from the Fourth Epoch was the cause of his predecessor's demise, Klein Moretti's investigation was brutally cut short. The arrival of the Nighthawks and the revelation of his friend's impossible suicides transformed him from a detective into the prime suspect. In a moment of chilling clarity, he chose his only viable path, a calculated lie of amnesia. This desperate gambit was put to the ultimate test when Inspector Dunn Smith, a beyonder who commands the domain of nightmares, invaded his very dreams. While Klein's lucid mind masterfully maintained the facade even in his subconscious, the ordeal only confirmed the terrifying power he was truly up against. Now, the reason for the Nighthawk's persistence has been laid bare. The cursed Antigonus notebook is missing, and as the sole survivor, Klein is their only lead. He is being escorted to meet an expert, a specialist in peeling back the veils of truth. But as he is led into the shadows of the very house where his friends died, can his performance hold against an expert who communes with the dead? Can a lie of the mind deceive a true spirit medium?
A true medium. The words echoed in my mind as I followed Captain Dunn Smith out of the carriage, my silence a flimsy shield for the storm of thoughts within. Welsh's home in Tingen was a handsome, detached house, the kind with a proper garden and iron gates that seemed designed to keep the world at bay. The street was wide enough for 4 carriages, lined with gas lamps that were entirely alien to my 21st century eyes. They were short, barely taller than a man, designed for a person to light them manually. The black metal frames cast checkered patterns of light and shadow, a strange marriage of classical art and industrial function. It was beautiful, in a way, coldness and warmth, darkness and light, all coexisting. We walked up the pathway, the last rays of the sunset painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The air was a pleasant mix, the faint perfume of flowers mingling with the crisp scent of lawn grass. It should have been relaxing. It wasn't. The moment I stepped through the ajar metal gate, a shiver, sudden and violent, racked my body. It felt as if 100 unseen eyes had snapped onto me. They were everywhere, in the shadows of the garden, lurking on the lawn, perched on the roof, hidden behind the children's swing. The place was physically empty, yet it felt more crowded than any street I'd ever been on. This bizarre contrast, this feeling of being intensely watched by nothing, sent a primal chill crawling up my spine. My carefully constructed composure was cracking. Something's wrong. The words escaped me before I could stop them, a low, urgent exclamation aimed at Dunn. His expression didn't so much as flicker. He walked beside me, his calm a stark rebuke to my panic. Just ignore them. Ignore them? How does one ignore the feeling of 1,000 invisible needles pricking their skin? But he was a Nighthawk, the professional here. So I swallowed my fear, forcing myself to tolerate the chilling sensation of being spied on by perpetrators I couldn't see. Each step towards the bungalow's main entrance was an act of will. If this went on any longer, I was certain I would go mad. Just as Dunn reached for the door, I couldn't help but glance back. The garden was empty. The flowers swayed gently in the wind, but not a single person was in sight. "Come in, gentlemen." A voice, ethereal and distant, drifted from within the house. Dunn simply turned the knob and pushed the door open. My eyes struggled to adjust. The living room was bathed in an eerie, cobalt blue glow emanating from a single candle on a marble coffee table. It painted the leather couches, the walls, and the faces of the occupants in a strange, spectral light. On the central sofa sat a woman. She wore a hooded black robe, her face made up with blue eyeshadow and blush that looked unnervingly stark in the blue light. A silver bracelet with a white crystal pendant hung from her wrist. My first thought, unbidden and sarcastic, was that she looked exactly like a stereotypical medium from a cheap movie. Was she deliberately typecasting herself? "Daily, any results?" Dunn asked, breaking the silence. The woman, Daly, flickered her twinkling emerald eyes toward me for a brief, analytical moment before returning her gaze to Dunn. The original spirits have all disappeared, including that of Welsh and Nyers. Right now, all these little rascals know nothing at all. Spirits. So that's what those unseen eyes were. Spirits. And there were so many of them? I quickly schooled my features, removing my hat and holding it to my chest in a gesture of formal respect. "Good evening, madam." Dunn sighed. "That's tricky." He then gestured toward me. Daily, this is Klein Moretti. See if you can get anything out of him. Her gaze locked onto me again, sharp and penetrating. She pointed to a single armchair. Please, take a seat. Thank you. I nodded, my heart beginning to hammer against my ribs. I walked over and sat, my obedience a thin veneer over a core of pure terror. This was it. My survival, the continued secrecy of my transmigration, it all came down to this. And the worst part? I had nothing to rely on but the hope that my soul's inherent specialness was enough to shield me. This feeling of utter helplessness was infuriating. Dunn settled onto the sofa opposite me. Daly, meanwhile, produced 2 small glass bottles from a pouch at her waist. Her emerald eyes held a hint of a smile as she addressed me. I need a bit of help here. After all, you are not an enemy, I can't treat you harshly. That might make you uncomfortable or put you in pain. It might even leave some serious after effects on you. I will give you some fragrances, making you feel tender and smooth, which will allow you to let loose bit by bit so that you can truly indulge in those feelings. My mind reeled. Tender and smooth? Indulge in those feelings? The phrasing sounded so wrong, so loaded with innuendo that my modern brain short-circuited. I could only stare, my shock likely written all over my face. Across from me, Dunn actually chuckled. Don't be weirded out. We are different from the fellows from the Church of the Lord of Storms. Here, the ladies can also verbally tease men. In this regard, you should be able to understand. Your mother was a devout believer of the goddess. You and your brother used to attend Sunday school at church. I understand, I managed, struggling to find the right words. It's just that I never thought that she would be such a. I almost blurted it out. Such a veteran driver. Don't worry, Dunn said, the corners of his mouth twitching. Actually, Daly seldom does this. She just wants to use these methods to calm you down. She prefers corpses over men. You make me sound perverted, Daly interjected with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She uncorked one of the bottles, dripping a few drops onto the blue candle flame. Night vanilla, slumber flower, and chamomile. I call it amatha, it means tranquility in the Hermes language. It smells really amazing. As the essence evaporated, a beautifully enchanting aroma filled my nostrils. The tension in my shoulders began to unclench, my racing heart slowing to a steady beat. I felt a wave of calm wash over me, like gazing into a silent, starry night. This bottle is called the Eye of the Spirit, she continued, opening the second one. Barks and leaves of drago and poplar trees, immersed in Lanti wine. Of course, there would be several incantations while we're at it. She dripped the amber liquid onto the flame. A new scent, ethereal and wine-like, joined the first. The candle flame danced wildly. The room began to swim before my eyes. Daly's eyeshadow and blush seemed to glow with an odd intensity, her image doubling and blurring. Her voice seemed to come from all directions at once. It is a great helping hand for mediumship. It is also a floral essence that is sufficiently enchanting. I felt my body begin to sway, to phase, to float. The world dissolved into an impressionist painting, the reds redder, the blues bluer, the blacks blacker. Hazy, indistinct murmurs rose around me, as if thousands of unseen people were debating in the room. This feels similar to the luck enhancement ritual, I thought, a spark of clarity in the bewildering haze. But it was different, too. There wasn't that feeling of impending madness, the sensation of my head about to explode. I could still think. Through the fog, my vision locked onto Daly's emerald eyes. She seemed to be staring at a point just above my head. Let me properly introduce myself, she said, her voice gentle and hypnotic. I am the spirit medium, Daly. I can still have rational thoughts. It's just like that ritual and the gathering. The realization was a lifeline. I had to play my part. I let my expression go slack, my voice muddled. Hello there. The mental worlds of humans are extremely vast. Look at the ocean, what we know about it is all on the superficial level. Anything that exists leaves some traces behind. Her words flowed on, weaving a spell, trying to lull my consciousness into submission. The shadows and winds around me seemed to form an ocean, my own spirit laid bare for her to search. I watched patiently from within my own mind. I let the surface of the ocean churn, creating meaningless ripples while keeping the deep, hidden truths concealed. To her probing, I offered only a confused, airy reply. No. I can't remember. I have forgotten. I even laced my voice with just the right amount of agony. She tried to guide me again, but the clear-headed core of me, the part that was Ju Mingrue, remained untouched, unmoved. Finally, a new voice cut through the haze. Okay. We shall end here. You may leave. Leave. The airy command echoed, and Daly's presence seemed to recede. The winds and shadows calmed. The colors returned to their normal state, and the fuzzy feeling dissipated. My body gave a sudden quiver, and I found myself solidly in the armchair again. I opened my eyes. I hadn't even realized I'd closed them. The blue-flamed candle was still there. Dunn was still lounging on the couch. Daly was still sitting opposite me, her expression unreadable. I had passed. Relief, so potent it was almost dizzying, washed over me. Thankfully, I'd had the luck enhancement ritual as a rehearsal. Why did you use the theory that belongs to that bunch of evil madmen, the psychology alchemists? Dunn asked Daly, his brow furrowed. Daly calmly put away her bottles. I think it's pretty accurate. At least, it corresponds with some of the things I've made contact with before. She shrugged. This tricky fellow did not leave a single trace behind. That was my cue. I feigned grogginess, rubbing my eyes. Oh, it's over? What happened? It felt like I just took a nap. Just take it as such, Dunn cut in, then looked back at Daly. Have you examined Welsh and Naya's bodies? The corpses can tell us a lot more than you can imagine, she replied, standing up. It's such a pity that Welsh and Naya had indeed committed suicide. So, the force that drove them to it is to be feared. Not a single trace was left behind. She pointed at the candle. I need some rest. The cobalt flame vanished, and the room was plunged into the blurry crimson twilight from the windows. Outside, Dunn led me back to the waiting carriage. Congratulations. You can return home now. But do remember, do not reveal this incident to your loved ones. You have to promise this. I felt a surge of surprise. Is there no need to examine the curses or the trails left behind by the evil spirits? Daly didn't mention anything about it, so there's no need for it, Dunn said simply. I tried to process that, but a more pressing worry surfaced. How can I be sure that I will be free from trouble from now on? Dunn's lips twitched. No worries. Based on statistics of similar incidents in the past, 80% of the survivors of the incident do not experience any horrifying after effects. Yeah. This is based on what I know, roughly, more or less. My blood ran cold. 80%? As a former keyboard warrior, I knew exactly what that meant. Then, there's still 1/5 of those poor souls. I wasn't about to gamble with those odds. Then you can consider joining us as a civilian staff, Dunn said casually, as if discussing the weather. This way, even if there are any precursors, we can discover it in time. Or simply become a Beyonder. After all, we are not nannies. We can't babysit you all day long and even watch what you do with women. Can I? The question was out before I could think. It was absurd. Becoming a Nighthawk, a Beyonder, just like that? Dunn paused on the carriage step and turned his head, his grey eyes shadowed. It's not that you can't. It depends. What? The sudden shift left me speechless. I just stared at him. Really? Was he kidding me? Was becoming a Beyonder, a possessor of supernatural power, so simple? He gave a light laugh, his eyes hidden in the carriage's shadow. You don't believe me, huh? Actually, when you become a Nighthawk you lose a lot. For instance, freedom. He hopped into the carriage. Even if we don't talk about this now, there is another issue. Firstly, you are not a member of the clergy, nor a devotee. You can't pick whatever you want or choose the safest approach. And secondly, he continued, his tone shifting. Among the cases that we, us, the mandated punisher, the machinery hive mind and other judiciaries, have to deal with annually, 1/4 of them were a result of Beyonders who lost control. 1/4. The words hit me like a physical blow. Dunn turned slightly, his grey eyes now deep and utterly devoid of any smile. And among the quarter of cases, a large number of them are our teammates. The weight of Dunn's words settled in the carriage, heavy and cold. A quarter of their cases were beyond us losing control. A large number of those were their own teammates. The implication was a chasm opening at my feet. A wave of tumultuous emotion, shock, fear, a morbid curiosity, crested within me. Why? The word was an instinct, a raw, reflexive utterance. So, this wasn't some fantasy novel where you get superpowers and live happily ever after. There were serious, hidden dangers. Dangers so potent that even the church's internal police, the very people who dealt with this bizarre world daily, were falling victim to them. Dunn was already seated, his expression and tone infuriatingly unchanged. He was the picture of calm in the face of my burgeoning crisis. This is not something that you need to understand. Neither is it something you can understand, unless you become one of us. His answer stopped me cold. For a moment, I just sat there, the gears in my mind grinding. Then, I managed a reply, half dubious, half joking. If I don't come to understand, how is it possible for me to make a decision to join? It was a perfect catch-22. I couldn't understand the risks without joining, but I couldn't sanely join without understanding the risks. A classic bureaucratic deadlock. Dunn merely took out his pipe again, not to light it, but to hold it under his nose and take a deep whiff of the unlit tobacco. You probably misunderstood, a civilian staff member is also one of us. Ah. A loophole. My mind, trained by years of navigating corporate policies and online terms of service, seized on it immediately. I had to be sure. In other words, I began, reorganizing my thoughts. As long as I become one of your civilian staff members, I will be able to understand the relevant secrets, figure out the hidden dangers that plague beyond us, and the dangers that I may encounter, as well as consider whether I want to become a beyonder later. A smile touched Dunn's lips. Yes, that is the case, except for one point. You cannot simply become a beyonder just because you want to. Every church will be equally strict in this aspect. It would be bizarre if they weren't strict, I snarked internally. Aloud, I pressed on, adding a bit more intensity to my voice and leaning forward slightly. What about civilian staff members? This should be quite strict as well, right? There shouldn't be any problems if it's you, Dunn said, his eyelids half closed as he savored his pipe. Why? The question was immediate. My mind was already racing, a sarcastic commentary bubbling just beneath the surface. Ah, of course. My uniqueness, my halo as a transmigrator, must be shining like a firefly in the night, so bright and outstanding that it's impossible to miss. Dunn opened his eyes, his grey gaze as tranquil as a still lake. First, you managed to survive without our help in such a situation. That demonstrates certain exceptional qualities not present in others. For instance, luck. Lucky people are often welcomed. My expression must have gone completely blank. Luck? He was recruiting based on luck? Seeing my face, he smiled slightly. All right, just treat this as a humorous statement. Second, you're a graduate of the history department from Koa University, this is something we urgently need. He then quoted some Lund bigwig named Lumi on the importance of talent, a point he agreed with. He must have seen the flicker of confusion in my eyes, because he elaborated without my asking. You should be able to imagine that we often encounter documents and objects from the Fourth Epoch or earlier. Many cults and heretics try to gain power from these things. Sometimes, they themselves can lead to strange and terrible things. He pointed to his own head with a self-mocking tilt to his mouth. Except for the beyond us in special fields, most of us are not good with our studies, or have passed that age. Those dry, boring knowledge always puts us to sleep. Even the sleepless can't help it. In the past, we would cooperate with historians or archaeologists, but this posed the risk of exposing secrets, and mishaps might befall these otherwise uninvolved professors. Thus, the addition of a professional in our ranks is hard to refuse. That made a chilling amount of sense. I nodded slowly, accepting his explanation. My thoughts were a chaotic jumble. Then why don't you directly, Groom 1? This brings me to the third point, which is also the final and most important point, Dunn said. You've already been through a similar ordeal, so inviting you doesn't violate the confidentiality clause. With regard to developing others, I would bear the responsibility of exposure if it fails. Most of our team members, our civilian staff members, come from within the church. So that was it. It wasn't my transmigrator's halo. It was risk management. I was already contaminated goods, a known quantity. Inviting me was safer than bringing in a clean outsider. After a moment of silent digestion, a question from my 21st century perspective surfaced. Why are you so strict about maintaining confidentiality? Wouldn't spreading the news publicly to more people and increasing awareness lessen the chances of a similar mistake from happening again? The greatest fear stems from the fear of the unknown. We can make the unknown become known. Dunn shook his head, a world of weary cynicism in the simple gesture. No. Humanity's stupidity is beyond your imagination. It would actually lead to more people emulating these acts, creating more chaos and more severe incidents. I felt a shock of recognition. The only lesson that humans can learn from history is that humans do not gain any lessons from history, and they're always repeating the same tragedies. That famous quote from Emperor Rozelle is indeed filled with much philosophical meaning, Dunn agreed. Damn it. Emperor Rozelle said that? My transmigrator senior really didn't leave any chances for the latecomers to act profound. I was left with nothing to say. Dunn turned to look out the carriage window, at the dim yellow street lamps painting streaks of light in the darkness. There is a similar discourse within the judiciary of the major churches. This may be the main reason for the strict confidentiality. What is it? I asked, my interest piqued. This felt like I was being let in on a great secret. He turned back, his face a mask. Faith and fear bring troubles. More faith and more fear bring more troubles, until everything is destroyed. He sighed. Besides praying for the blessings and help from gods, humans can't solve their real major problems. Faith and fear bring troubles. More faith and more fear bring more troubles. I recited the words under my breath, the meaning just beyond my grasp but the chilling weight of them settling deep in my bones. The darkness outside the carriage suddenly seemed more menacing, populated by callous eyes and gaping mouths. As the carriage wheels rattled on, nearing Iron Cross Street, Dunn broke the silence. His voice was formal now. Would you like to join us as a civilian staff member? The question hung in the air. My mind was a whirlwind of pros and cons. The 20% chance of some horrifying after effect if I said no. The danger of losing control if I said yes and eventually became a beyonder. The promise of knowledge. The threat of the unknown. Can I have some time to consider? I asked. This was too big a decision to make hastily. No problem, just give me a reply before Sunday, he nodded. Of course, remember to keep this a secret. Don't disclose the information regarding Welsh to anyone, including your brother and sister. Once this is violated, it'll not only bring them trouble, but you might also have to attend a special court. Okay, I answered gravely. Silence fell again. As my apartment building came into view, one last, crucial question popped into my head. It felt almost profane after the philosophical weight of our conversation, but it had to be asked. Mr. Smith, what kind of salary and benefits do civilian staff get? This was a serious question. A man has to live. Dunn was taken aback for a second, then a genuine smile broke across his face. There's no need for you to worry about this. Our funds are guaranteed by the church and the police department. For newly registered civilian staff, the weekly salary is £2.10 solely, with an additional 10 solely as compensation for risk and confidentiality. A total of £3. Hardly worse than a confirmed university lecturer. £3 a week. That was a significant sum, far more than I could hope to earn as a recent graduate. The contract is generally 5 years, he continued, as the carriage pulled to a stop. After 5 years, you can quit, but you have to sign a lifetime confidentiality agreement and you're not allowed to leave Tingen without permission. By the way, there are no weekends. You work in shifts. I get it now, I said, stepping out of the carriage. I stopped and turned back. By the way, Mr. Smith, where do I find you after I've come to my decision? A low, throaty laugh rumbled from within the carriage. Go to the Hound pub on Beswick Street and find the boss, right? Tell him that you want to hire a small mercenary squad for a mission. Who? I was utterly confused. Our location is confidential too, he said with a smile. All right, Mr. Klein Moretti, I wish you a good dream tonight as well. I took off my hat and gave a small salute, watching the carriage pull away and disappear into the pre-dawn gloom. I pulled out my pocket watch. It was just past 4 in the morning. The street was quiet, cool, and peaceful under the dim yellow light. I took a deep breath, the silence a stark contrast to the invisible horrors at Wells' residence. It was only then, standing alone on the empty street, that I realized the back of my linen shirt was completely drenched in cold, clammy sweat. Phew, I finally got through the round with the medium. I let out a foul breath, the tension from the scene still clinging to me like a shroud. Turning slowly, I let the cool night breeze wash over me, a welcome and tranquil contrast to the evening's events. As I walked closer and closer to my apartment building, the inexplicable and amazing feeling returned. It was as if I'd been granted a few more hours than everyone else, a secret slice of time carved out of the crimson-tinged darkness. The thought hastened my pace. With my keys in hand, I found the correct one, inserted it into the lock, and turned it gently. The door opened with a creak, inviting the night in. The staircase was empty, the cold air invigorating. In this state of mind, I opened the door to our apartment and froze. Before I even stepped inside, I saw a silhouette sitting silently in front of my desk. Reddish-black hair, bright brown eyes, a delicate face. Melissa. Klein, where did you go? She asked, her eyebrows relaxing from a tense line. Without waiting for my reply, she added, just now, I got up to go to the bathroom and realized you weren't home. She had that look on her face, the one that meant she needed to understand the entire chain of cause and effect, the underlying logic of the matter. My brain, well practiced in the art of deceiving parents from a lifetime ago, spun up instantly. I managed a bitter smile and calmly replied, I couldn't fall asleep again after I woke up. Instead of wasting time, I decided that I should train my body. So I went out to run a few rounds. Look at my sweat. I took off my jacket and half-turned, pointing to my back as evidence. Melissa stood, glanced half-heartedly at my back, and deliberated for a moment. Honestly speaking, Klein, you don't have to stress yourself out. I'm sure you can pass the interview to get into Tingen University. Even if you can't, if you can still find better ones. I haven't even thought about that interview. The concerns of a normal life felt so distant now. I understand, I nodded, not mentioning the offer I'd received. I hadn't decided if I wanted it yet. She stared at me intensely for a moment, then suddenly turned and trotted into the other room. She returned with a strange object that looked like a mechanical tortoise, a mishmash of gears, rusted iron, and springs. After a quick wind-up of the torsion spring, Melissa placed it on the desk. K.A. 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 Dumb. 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 The tortoise moved and jumped with a rhythm that was surprisingly captivating. Whenever I feel irritated, I feel much better seeing this tortoise move, Melissa invited, her eyes bright. I've been doing this very often recently and it's very effective. Klein, give it a try. I couldn't turn down my sister's goodwill. I watched the little machine until it wound down, a genuine smile on my face. Simplicity and regularity can indeed help relaxation. Without waiting for her to reply, I pointed at it. Did you make this yourself? When did you make this? Why wasn't I aware of it? I made use of unwanted materials from school and things I picked up from the streets to make this. It was only finished 2 days ago, she said, her usual tone betraying a hint of pride as the corners of her lips upturned. That's impressive, I praised sincerely. As a boy whose mechanical skills peaked and then plummeted with a four-wheel toy car, her talent was genuinely remarkable. With her chin slightly raised, Melissa replied calmly, it was okay. Being overly humble is a bad trait, I smiled. This is a tortoise, right? Instantly, the atmosphere in the room plunged. An air of graveness settled between us. Then, in a faint voice that seemed as enigmatic as the crimson moonlight, Melissa said, it's a puppet. Puppet. Now why does that sound so much creepier than tortoise? I gave an awkward smile, trying to salvage the situation. The problem lies in the materials, they're too rudimentary. I quickly tried to change the subject. Why would you go to the bathroom in the middle of the night? Isn't there a toilet here? Don't you always sleep till dawn? Melissa was taken aback. Just as she opened her mouth to explain, an intense digestive gurgle echoed from her stomach. I'll go get some more sleep. Bang! She grabbed her tortoise-like puppet, fled to her room, and shut the door. Last night's dinner was too good, she ate too much. I shook my head, smiling, and walked over to my desk. I sat down soundlessly as the crimson moon emerged from behind the clouds, and began to truly ponder Dunn Smith's invitation. Being a Nighthawk civilian staff member had its apparent disadvantages. I'm a transmigrator. I'm the fool, the initiator of a mysterious gathering. I have multiple secrets. Placing myself directly under the noses of the Church of the Evernight Goddesses Beyonder team was risky. As soon as I joined, my goal would be to become a Beyonder myself to better cover up the benefits I gained from the gathering. Yet, becoming a formal member would mean surrendering my freedom. No longer could I go where I wanted, do what I wanted. I'd have to report leaving Tingen. I would miss opportunities. The Nighthawks are a strict organization, I'd have to accept orders without question. And of course, there was the ever-present risk of losing control. I listed the disadvantages one by one, then turned to the necessities and advantages. The luck enhancement ritual proved one thing: I am not a lucky person. Bizarre and dangerous events are bound to find me. Only by becoming a Beyonder and joining an organization like the Nighthawks could I gain the ability to resist. My wish to become a Beyonder can't rely solely on the gathering. A potion formula is one thing, but where would I find the materials? How could I concoct them? I can't exactly consult Justice and the Hanged Man on every trivial matter without shattering the mysterious image of the fool and arousing their suspicions. Sourcing rare materials myself would also leave a trail right back to my real identity. Online disputes would quickly become offline conflicts, bringing immense trouble. By joining the Nighthawks, I'd gain access to common knowledge of the mystery world, to proper channels, to a social circle. This leverage would allow me to better manage the gathering and gain the greatest benefits from it, creating a virtuous cycle where my gains in reality would feed back into more resources. Of course, I could try to join a secret organization like the Psychology Alchemists, but that meant losing my freedom while also living in constant fear. More importantly, I had no idea how to even find them. It was far too rash. Becoming a civilian staff member offered a buffer, a potential exit strategy. As the old saying from my world went, the inferior recluse hides away in the wild, the superior, the crowd. Perhaps the identity of a Nighthawk was the perfect cover. In the future, when I become one of the top authorities of a tribunal, who would ever imagine that I am also a heretic, the head of a secret organization working behind the scenes? As the first rays of the morning sun cut through the crimson, my mind was made up. I would find Dunn Smith today and become a Nighthawk. Just then, Melissa pushed open the door, surprised to see me stretching. You didn't sleep? I was thinking through some things, I said with a relaxed smile. She thought for a moment. Whenever I encounter problems, I'll list out both the pros and cons one by one and compare them. After that, I can usually get a hint of what I should do next. That's a good habit, I smiled back. I did that too. After a quick breakfast, I took a nap. There was no rush, the pubs wouldn't be open yet. At 2 in the afternoon, I brushed my silk hat and tidied my formal suit, dressing as if for a proper interview. Beswick Street was a fair distance, so I decided to take a public horse carriage from Iron Cross Street. The one that arrived was a double-decker running on tracks, operated by the Orbital Carriage Company. To Beswick Street, I told the driver. You have to transfer at Champagne Street, he explained. From there, it's about a 10-minute walk. Let's go to Champagne Street then, I agreed. A young man collected the fare. It's more than 4 kilometers, for pence. Okay. I fished out the copper coins. I only have 3 pence left. Looks like I'm walking back. I pressed my hat down and took a seat on the first floor. It was quiet, filled with well-dressed people and workers reading newspapers. I closed my eyes, recharging until I heard the call for Champagne Street. After alighting, I asked for directions and soon found myself on Beswick Street, standing before a pub with a brownish-yellow hound logo. I pushed the heavy door open, and a wave of uproarious noise and heat washed over me. The pub was dimly lit and already crowded. In the center were two large iron cages, their bottoms sunk deep into the ground. Men holding wooden mugs surrounded them, shouting and laughing. Curious, I peered inside and saw two dogs. One looked like a husky from Earth, the other was a sleek, fierce-looking black dog. Do you want to bet? Doug has won 8 games in a row, a short man in a brown beret said, sidling up to me and pointing at the black dog. Bet? My mind immediately flashed to what the aristocrats at Koei University used to say about the lower classes. Dog fighting? I asked. The short man smirked. Mister, we're civilized people. We don't engage in such unglamorous activities. He then leaned in and whispered, besides, laws were introduced to ban these things last year, then what are you all betting on? I asked, confused. The better hunter. Just as he said that, a cacophony erupted. You can't place a bet for this round as it has started, he said, turning away excitedly. I stood on my toes to get a better view. 2 men dragged sacks over to the cages, opened the doors, and dumped the contents inside. Rats! Hundreds of grey, disgusting rats, swarming in the pit with no way out. The cage doors were shut and the dogs' chains were untied. Woof! The black dog, Doug, leaped forward and killed a rat in one bite. The husky-like dog looked dazed for a second before it started playing excitedly with the rats. The crowd roared, shouting, bite it! Kill it, and Doug! Mother *** king rat baiting with dogs. The corner of my mouth twitched. So that's what they were betting on, which dog could catch more rats. No wonder people were buying live rats at Iron Cross Street. That's really unique. Shaking my head, I laughed to myself and made my way to the bar. New here? The bartender asked, not looking up from the cup he was wiping. 1 cup of rye beer is a penny. I came here for Mr. Wright, I said directly. The bartender whistled and shouted to the side, old man, someone is looking for you. A drunk old man stood up from behind the bar. Lad, were you looking for me? Mr. Wright, I would like to hire a small mercenary squad for a mission, I recited, just as Dunn had instructed. A small mercenary squad? Are you living in an adventure story? The bartender cut in with a laugh. Wright paused, then asked, who told you to look for it here? Dunn. Dunn Smith, I replied honestly. Wright chuckled. I see. Actually, the small mercenary squad still exists. It's just in another form, with a more contemporary name. You can find it on the 2nd floor of number 36 Suitland Street. Thank you. I squeezed my way back out of the pub. Just as I reached the door, the crowd went quiet, murmuring, Doug was actually defeated. I smiled, shook my head, and left quickly, finding my way to the nearby Zootland Street. I counted the numbers, 30, 32, 34. Here. I walked into the stairwell, rounded the corner, and climbed the stairs. There it was, a vertical sign with the new name of the so-called small mercenary squad. Blackthorn Security Company. Blackthorn Security Company. The signboard was both surprising and, after a moment's thought, perfectly reasonable. Man, what do I even say about this? I shook my head, a laugh escaping me, and walked up the steps. With my right hand, I knocked gently on the half-closed door. Knock! 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 The sound echoed slowly, rhythmically, into the silence. There was no response, only a faint sputtering sound from within. I tried again, with the same result. Switching tactics, I pushed the door open a little wider and peered inside. The room was furnished with a classic sofa, a soft armchair, and a burly wooden coffee table. Right across from the door, behind a desk, a girl with brown hair sat with her head drooped forward, clearly asleep. Even though security company is just a guise, isn't this just too unprofessional? My internal monologue was already in full complaint mode. How long has this place been out of business? Right, you guys don't actually need any business. I drew closer and knocked on the table right beside the girl's ear. Knock! Knock! She shot up immediately, snatching the newspaper in front of her and using it to cover her face. Tingen City Honest Paper. Nice name. I silently read the title on the page facing me. The steam train service Soaring Expresses that directly reaches Constant City is starting operations today. Oh come on, when will there be one that goes straight to Brindisi Bay? I really don't want to take the ship there again, it's too awful, really awful. Hey, who are you? The girl read pretentiously before lowering the paper. Her bright forehead and light brown eyes blinked at me with a look that was equal parts fawning and startled. Hello, I am Klein Moretti, I said, removing my hat and holding it to my chest in a slight bow. I am here at the invitation of Dunn Smith. The brown-haired girl, who looked to be in her early 20s and was dressed in a light green Lund-style dress with beautiful lace, scrambled to her feet. The captain, all right, wait here for a moment. I'll go get him. She scurried off into an adjacent room. She didn't even serve a cup of water or anything. The level of service awareness is worrying. I waited where I stood, a faint smile on my lips. A few minutes later, she reappeared with a sweet smile. Mr. Moretti, please follow me. The captain is on watch at the Channing's Gate and is unable to leave at the moment. Okay. I followed her, my mind already turning over the new piece of information. Channing's Gate, what could that be? We passed through a partition into a small corridor with 3 offices on each side. Some doors were locked tight, others were open, revealing people typing away on heavy mechanical typewriters. My eyes caught a familiar figure, the young officer with black hair and blue eyes, the one with the vibe of a romantic poet who had investigated my apartment. He wasn't in uniform, his white shirt was untucked, giving him an unruly appearance. Perhaps he really is a poet. I nodded a greeting, and he smiled back. The brown-haired girl pushed open the office door at the end of the hall on the left. We still have to go down a few levels, she chirped. The office was empty of furniture, containing only a greyish-white stone staircase spiraling downwards. Gas lamps lit the way, their stable glow dispelling the darkness. She led the way, carefully watching her feet. Although I walk here often, I am still constantly afraid of falling down, tumbling down like a barrel, she chattered. You don't know, Leonard did such a folly. On the first day of becoming a sleepless, the first day where he had not mastered his new powers, he tried to rush down the flight of stairs. And he became a cartwheel. Ha ha, it was hilarious. Oh yes, it was the guy that greeted you just now. This was about 3 years ago. Speaking of which, I have been with the Nighthawks for 5 years, I was only 17 when I joined, she suddenly smacked her forehead. I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Roseanne. My father was a member of the Nighthawks who sacrificed himself in an accident 5 years ago. I suppose we are colleagues from now on, yeah, colleague it is the right word, we are not teammates since we are not beyond us. I hope to have the honor, but it still depends on what Mr. Smith has to say, I replied, taking in the enclosed, subterranean surroundings. A dampness seeped from the stone walls, chasing away the summer heat. Don't worry, the fact that you came so far means the captain has agreed, Roseanne said, her voice sugary. I've always been a little afraid of him, even though he is amiable, a fatherly figure. I don't know why, but I'm still afraid. Isn't being afraid of a father normal? I answered humorously. True. She agreed, and we rounded a bend. The stairs ended, opening onto a stone-paved floor. It was a long aisle, the walls mounted with gas lamps encased in metal gratings. Our shadows stretched out long behind us. I keenly noticed that every few meters, there was a dark sacred emblem, the symbol of the Evernight goddess. The emblem seemed to exert a calming, serene influence, and even Roseanne fell silent. Soon, an intersection appeared. The path to the left will lead to the St. Selina Cathedral, Roseanne introduced quietly. To the right are the armory, storeroom, and archives. And straight ahead is the Channing's Gate. St. Selina Cathedral? Then Zoutland Street is just behind Red Moonlight Street? I was a little stunned. St. Selina Cathedral was the headquarters of the Church of the Evernight Goddess in Tingen. I knew my status as a newcomer made it unsuitable to ask more, so I just listened silently. We continued straight. In less than a minute, a heavy black iron split gate came into view, carved with 7 sacred emblems. It stood like a giant guarding the darkness, cold, domineering, and final. Channing's Gate, Roseanne reminded me. She pointed to a room beside it. Captain is inside. Go on in by yourself. All right, thank you, I replied politely. I took a deep breath to calm myself. Come in. Dunsmith's deep, amiable voice came from inside. I gently opened the unlatched door. The room contained only a table and 4 chairs. Dunn, with his high hairline and black coat, sat reading a newspaper. Come and have a seat. Have you decided? Are you certain you want to join us? He asked, putting down the paper with a smile. I removed my hat, bowed, and sat down. Yes, I am certain. Then take a look at this deed, heh. People like to call it a contract now. Dunn pulled 2 copies of a contract from a drawer. The clauses were few, mostly covering what he'd already told me. The emphasis was on confidentiality. Any violations would be tried not by the kingdom's courts, but by the church's tribunals. It's like a court-martial. A 5-year term, £2.10 solely for weekly wages, plus a 10 solely compensation for risk and confidentiality. I read it through and answered resolutely, I've no problem with it. Then sign it. He indicated a dark red fountain pen. I took a breath and signed my name on both copies, Klein Moretti. Lacking a stamp, I used my thumbprint. Dunn took the contracts, stamped them in several places, then stood up. He handed 1 copy back to me and extended his other hand. Welcome. From now on, you are one of us. And please note that the contract is confidential as well. I stood and shook his hand. So, I shall be addressing you as Captain. Yes. Dunn's greyish eye seemed especially deep in the dim light. We sat back down. I glanced at the stamp on my copy, Nighthawk Squad, Tin Gen City, Awar County, Lun Kingdom. I can't believe you guys would use the name of Blackthorn Security Company as a disguise, I said with a laugh. Actually, we have other signboards, Dunn replied, pulling another paper from the drawer. It was an official document stamped by the city government and police department. It read, 7th Unit, Special Operations Department, Awar County Police, Lun Kingdom. The first 4 units are regular police, Dunn explained. From Unit 5 onwards are the ones dealing with supernatural incidents. Our unit, the 7th, is responsible for incidents related to the followers of the Evernight Goddess in the north, west, and Golden Indus regions of Tin Gen. Unit 6, the mandated punishers from the Church of the Lord of Storms, handles the PO, east, and south. Unit 5, the Machinery Hivemind Squad, covers the university area and the suburbs. Right, I said, absorbing this new map of the city's hidden power structure. I then laughed. What happens if someone really comes here due to the Blackthorn Security Company's signboard and requests for our services? We'll take those requests, why shouldn't we? As long as it doesn't affect our daily operations, Dunn said slowly. Any earnings are considered additional bonuses. Anyway, the market for finding dogs and cats has been monopolized by private detectives. So how many people are there in this Nighthawk Squad? I asked. There aren't many supernatural incidents, so there are even fewer beyond us. There are only 6 formal members of the Nighthawks in the entire Tin Gen City, including me. Heh, as for civilian staff, there are 6 including you. I nodded. It was time. I finally asked the question that I was most concerned about. So, Captain, what do you mean by beyond us losing control? Why does it happen?